the news today. It's disappointing, but it is the right decision. And I think if you look at the last 4 or 5 years here at Montana State, we've made very sound decisions based on the health and well-being of our student athletes. And when you looked at the schedule and how it matched up timeline-wise with the climate that we are going to be in, the safety of our student athletes came to the forefront and was the ultimate reason why we made this decision. Obviously, there are a lot of other factors that come into it, but when you look at those 105 to 106 young men, and you want them to go into the elements like we were going to ask them to do, it's just, in my opinion, it's just not right. We want to provide them with the best opportunity to develop as young men, to develop as students, and to develop as athletes. And asking them to do that just wasn't in their best interest, and is not in our best interest. And so in consultation, obviously, with the University of Montana, and given our locale, we just felt it was the best decision for all involved, given the timeline that we were given from the Big Sky Conference schedule. And so at the end of the day, our student athletes are our number one asset, and we're going to take care of our student athletes to the utmost of our responsibilities. Coach?
Yeah, I think it's been said, this decision did not come about overnight. This has been something that we've had a lot of discussion about because it's been an ongoing topic. And I think that when you couple our concerns about being able to prepare a team to go compete at the end of February, when we know that we're going to have to start basically in 2 weeks of practicing, and that the worst of the winter conditions are in front of us, that it was going to be difficult at best, and even potentially impossible to prepare a team to go play the 6-game conference slate. This has been a moving target. We had this discussion back in October with the league, and at the time the discussion was centered around, do we try to play 6 games or 8 games? And we didn't really have a time frame for this. And so when you couple the concerns that we have that are, I think, unique to Montana and Montana State, with our geography, our climate, and our and neither team having an indoor, with the concerns about a turnaround and how that would impact the health and safety of our student athletes for the fall of 21, that's where this thing landed. And I can say this, I'm not sure that Coach Choate and I agree on a lot, but we agreed on this. And we agreed that this was the right move for both of our programs and our student athletes, with keeping them at the forefront. And I think that, I would say this, we consulted extensively with medical people, and we even followed the NCAA guidelines. And there's a clause in the NCAA guidelines for participation in practice that states that they do not recommend in any situation athletes be required to practice or participate in temperatures below 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, I can promise you I was going to have to ask our student athletes to do that. And when you couple that with the concerns about safe and secure playing surfaces, I can plow the snow off the turf, but that doesn't guarantee that it's not an ice skating rink. And we've been out there in those conditions before, and we've had to pull our guys off the field because that's something that we're not going to do, is put them in harm's way. And we were going to have to do that repeatedly. And then you back that up with some of the other things that we're talking about, with the COVID issue still being very much at the forefront, some of the challenges that we're facing with basketball. This was not a decision that we went into lightly, but we feel very strongly that it was the right decision for our program and for our young men. I'll turn it over to questions for Leon.
Alex, why don't you start us?
What was the players' reactions, and how involved were they in the process of kind of making this decision as well?
Yeah, and I'll let Coach Choate answer that when he talks. The players were consulted all the time, and their input drives every decision that we make here. And from position coaches to the head coach, they're having those conversations. And obviously, players want to play, right? They want to play as much as they possibly can. But I think when it comes down to it, we have to do our jobs to make sure that they are physically prepared to play. Because if we're starting to stop in practice in those ramp up weeks to get prepared, and we're putting them on the field against somebody that has not had the interruptions that we have had because of our climate, that is simply just not fair. And we can't put our student athletes in those positions. So, I mean, yeah, they all want to play. But here they want the student athlete experience. They want the Montana State football experience. They want fans in the stands. They want Gold Rush to come out 20,000 screaming fans all in their gold shirts. They want football the way they know football is here. So I think that played into that as well. But players want to play, and we got to do our job to put them in the right position to be able to play.
And then this might be jumping the gun here a little bit, but is there any information on who we might play in a non-conference type of format or schedule?
Yeah, we're still researching that. I think we're taking the approach this spring to do the right things at the right times to really develop our student athletes. We haven't really participated in live action or tackled anybody here since December of 2019. And so we've got a lot of work to do to get our student athletes ready to be able to do that. And we will do that. And then we do want to give them some live competition. And so, we're going to look around the state of Montana, and see if what some of the other smaller conferences are doing and see if they, would want to come here and play. We're going to leave our options open, but that's going to be towards the tail end of this when the weather is nice and the conditions are ready for us to be able to do that. But we have some work to do to be able to get our student athletes ready to be in that position.
Thank you, Leon.
Thank you.
All right, Coulter Nuanez, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Hi, Leon. From a revenue perspective, revenue generation perspective, obviously no fans is something that would be a challenge in the first place. But I mean, how much did that impact just not being able to actually garner much, if any, revenue if a spring season was to take place?
Yeah, I think those conversations were had, but we really did. Once we knew that it wasn't going to be safe for the student athletes, we could just stop all conversations, because that's like, I go back to it. That's first and foremost. Then if it was going to be safe, then we had to take maybe some of those other considerations into play, but we really didn't have to, because we knew that we've been through enough springs here. I think everybody knows the way Coach Choate feels about spring. We know what our weather conditions are here. We know what the field is going to be like. And so once you just have those conversations, I mean, the decisions become pretty clear. But we did our due diligence. We talked a lot about it, and just arrived at a spot to where it just simply wasn't safe.
Having 2 seasons in a single year was going to be a tenuous one, no matter what, particularly player safety, but also just the integrity of the season. I mean, do you feel like now that you actually have a common goal to shoot for a start date next fall, it kind of just gets you back on track of being kind of more normal?
I think when we talked, and when Coach Choate and I talked about this, it was having more control over your schedule to guarantee the student athletes that we know that we can pull this off. The worst thing that we could do is have a schedule, start and stop, and pull games out from under them. We've talked a lot about the mental health aspect of our student athletes during this time. And for us to be able to try and give them a schedule that we can better control and more guarantee will be better for them in the long run when you look at their academic coursework that they're doing here, but also to develop as athletes as well. All those things play a part in their day. And if we can make their day more normal and not make changes for them, then they're going to develop better. And so we feel really good about that, in that by moving this back, getting better conditions, we're going to be able to provide a better environment for them to be able to develop.
Last one for me, we just talked to, or at least some of us just talked to Kent Haslam as well, and he said he didn't anticipate playing any games against conference opponents. In terms of the games that could be played this spring, any idea in terms of the specifics of who those might be, when they might be, or is that just kind of a moving target?
It's definitely a moving target, but we're keeping all options open. We definitely want to give our student athletes some live competition. We definitely think we need that because of the kind of the time frame and the break that there has been from that. Their bodies are going to need that as we move into a fall season. But our options are, we're going to remain open and see kind of who's available and when they're available.
Let's go next to Slim Kimmel. Go ahead, Slim.
Hey, Leon, hope you're doing well. Obviously, football's the big news breaker today, but you guys have a lot of other sports that are supposed to be in progress this spring. What are the challenges that lie ahead for everything else MSU has to offer besides football?
Yeah, obviously we've talked a lot about, the challenges that we've had to face here all year, going back to, March of last year. But what I can tell you is we have been, and I'm just going to reiterate it, we've been in such a great spot from a university perspective and really from an athletic department perspective, from the support we get from the university, but also from our support areas, from Bozeman Health, our athletic trainers, our strength and conditioning staff, our academic staff. We have been working really hard to make sure that this facility was open and accessible to our student athletes to be able to come in and do the things that they need to do. And that's still the case. We have tests that we have access to, and we're abiding by all the NCAA regulations. The teams that can practice are practicing. That has never been an issue, and that's all because of the, kind of the support and the setup that we've had here. So we feel good about where we are, but obviously we've entered this knowing that we are going to have to make adjustments. Could be on a daily basis. Our staff has been really flexible. Our coaches have been flexible, and we're going to need to keep that mindset because we know things are going to happen in the future that we can't control.
And then while I have you here, my news department wants to ask if you have a reaction to House Bill 112 that's going to be heard next week.
Yeah, basically there are going to be some, NCAA is going to go into NCAA legislation about, with that, there's going to be regulations with that. So we have, I think you need to contact Montana's Jean Gee about that. She is kind of the rep for the state system regarding that bill. Obviously, we're not a proponent or an opponent of that, but she can answer that question for you, Slim.
Thanks, Leon. Appreciate it.
Yep, thank you.
Let's go next to Sean Rainey. Go ahead, Sean.
Hey, Leon. I know you probably, can't really speak for other universities, but obviously, Portland State opted out as well. What were some of the conversations like maybe with some of the other schools? And, I mean, obviously when you think of Big Sky, I think Montana State are at the top. So how do you maybe see the rest of the spring going for the rest of the conference, and what would you want it to look like, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it's a topic of conversation in all of our meetings. Just doing the research, watching what's going around the country, taking a look at the fall season, what happened there, taking a look at basketball now and the winter sports that are in play. And, when we saw, what was going on in the fall season and, what was it? Maybe 30% of the bowls were actually played. Having all the tests and everything that were around, you had the test, but there were still issues, right? And we talked a lot to Mark Orr at Sac State, when they made the decision early to opt out on kind of why they did it. Of course, we talked a lot to, University of Montana and kind of knowing that we were in the same conditions there, and going to be dealing with some of the same issues. And then, but I think the big thing is we support the schools that are going to try and play. We support the fact that they're doing it. My hope is that they support us in our decision because we're making the decision for what's best and right for Montana State University. And we've got to be able to take care of ourselves. And each institution within this conference is going to make decisions that is in the best interest of their institution. But I think we did a lot of research. We always do have a lot of conversation on our meetings. But in the end, I mean, this came down to Montana State University, what's best for our football program, our student athletes, and our athletic department.
From a fan perspective, obviously, we love being on the sidelines. We love watching football and stuff. And there's a lot of, disappointed fans across the Treasure State right now. Just from a fan perspective, obviously having to wait longer. We know the reasons why and everything like that. But, it is kind of a bummer day for a lot of those fans that were hoping that we'd have some spring footballs. Like your message or reaction to them.
I get it. I understand. I'm a sports fan. Obviously have the job in sports, but I'm a sports fan at heart. So I completely understand. I would ask all of our fans to understand and really know why we made this decision. Because if we don't have student athletes, we don't get to do the things that we do on Saturdays or in here when we're playing basketball games. We need our student athletes to be healthy, to be able to develop, and to be ready to play. And we simply just couldn't provide that environment given the time frame that we were given. So I would just ask them to support us in this decision, and let's all band together and get ready for the fall.
Thanks, Leon.
Yep.
Let's go next to Paul Schwedelson. Paul, go ahead.
Hey, Leon, I guess I'm just wondering how much does this kind of put an emphasis on desire for an indoor practice facility in the future?
Yeah, I think it's in our master plan. It's been part of our plan all along. We felt getting the Bobcat Athletic Complex, which we just toured today, and it's an unbelievable facility, getting that done first because of the wide-ranging impacts it's going to have throughout our entire department. But the indoor has always been an important part of that because of the conditions and what we're going to be facing here at the end of the fall and then into the winter and spring months. We know we deal with it. We deal with it every single year. It's a high priority and, something we're going to have to take a look at.
Thanks.
Okay, if we don't have anything else for Leon, we'll thank him for jumping on, and then we'll slide Coach Choate in.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Leon.
All right. We get Bill to, we're going rock, paper, scissors. What are we doing here?
Let's, I see Sean Rainey's hand up, so let's start with Sean. Go ahead, Sean.
Coach, obviously, kind of a disappointing day for a lot of fans out there. Obviously, we know the reasons why and things like that. But what would your message be to some of the fans that were looking forward to watching Montana State football this spring?
Yeah, I think we're still going to have some Montana State football this spring. I think it's just not going to be a 6 or 8 game schedule. And that was, part of this, looking at this big picture of not just what we want to do right now, but really what's in the best interest of our student athletes and our program in the future as well. And that was the biggest part of this. I mean, I think there's a high level of uncertainty. Keep this in mind, Sean. Okay, there's no promise the FCS is actually going to host a championship this spring. Okay, there's a high level of uncertainty about that alone. And so when you start to kind of stack these things, when you start with player safety, health, and well-being, and then you start stacking the other reasons why this is going to be difficult and challenging on top of that, I think that the tipping point for me was these kids have been through enough. And if I can control what this schedule is going to look like, or we can control it to a certain degree with a pretty high level of certainty, then that's in our best interest. And so we're working towards having the ability to get a couple ball games out there. Certainly we'll have some level of spring football at the very least, and then push forward to the fall of 21.
How can obviously in spring ball, you're in a normal spring season, you're just scrimmaging your own team and things like that. How can maybe playing a different opponent in the spring be advantageous and help your program as you move into the fall?
Yeah, I think there's a variety of reasons. Number one, you can create that game setting, and there's going to be some anxiety that goes along with that. And then you can observe and evaluate how young men kind of perform in that setting. As coaches, we get the opportunity to go through a game plan, and I think that's beneficial, especially for our young players. And I think that, once you turn the scoreboard on, things change. And you get to see who the competitors are, you get to see who the playmakers are, and especially with our young group, we are kind of a veteran roster right now. And I think that played into this decision too. Leon referenced their desire to have an experience that has kind of been denied to them, and not just football. I mean, this has been the case with most sports over the course of the last year. And I think that was really a big point for our older guys. Were like, if we can just get to a point where we can maybe have some normalcy, and, how about senior day with your parents not there? Is that a great idea? Probably not. And so some of these things that maybe we can control a little bit more with a vaccine now present and some hopefully better days on the horizon, that was another part of this equation. And so I think we can get a lot accomplished. Like I said, the game plan aspect of it, the game type of setting, and I think we can still achieve some progress in that regard.
Thanks, Coach. I'll let everyone else hop in.
Colton Poole, what do you have?
Hey, Jeff. Yeah, so obviously these concerns about having a spring season have always been present. Just what do you think went into the kind of the timeline of making this decision and this announcement, specifically making this decision now instead of maybe months ago or what have you?
Yeah, I honestly think that part of the problem was there was a lack of communication, especially with the coaches. We had basically 2 coaches meetings. In one of those meetings, the only questions we were asked is, do you want a 6-game season or an 8-game season? There was no, what does this look like, in terms of your prep, your ramp up to the season. And I think that was a little bit problematic when you start to really look at the reality of this. And we finally got on as a coach, as just a group of coaches. And I think that allowed us to maybe speak more freely when you're not in front of conference officials and administrators. And it was clear to me that every single institution was in a different place, every single one. And that didn't provide a great deal of confidence to, I think, Bobby or myself, that we were going to be able to, pull some of this stuff off, given the fact that the state of Arizona has the highest rate of COVID infection in the entire world right now, or what's going on in California in terms of some of the lockdowns that they're dealing with. And so, like I said in the release, I respect and appreciate everybody's challenges through this. And if they felt like that, it was important for them to push through and get this, whatever schedule it's going to be, done, man, I fully support them. And as Leon said, I hope they support and respect our decision as well.
And the spring, I think you mentioned before that you didn't want it to negatively impact the fall. So how much was that at the forefront of your mind too, of not, leaving little time to recover from a spring season and then having to push to a fall? Just how much was that involved too?
I appreciate the question, because I think that's the piece of this player safety, health, and well-being that isn't being talked about enough. Clearly, there's issues with COVID that are, globally understood by now, right? That they're dealing with them in basketball right now. They dealt with them in football, pro sports, everything, right? And so that's the number one point, is this COVID issue. The number two point that's specific to Montana State, being that we are the only two schools that are in cold weather climates that either that don't have an indoor space to practice and prepare. That was the second tipping point for us, right? Okay, then let's talk about what you're going to ask kids' bodies to do. There's a reason why the rhythm of this game has been the way it has for over a century. It takes bodies a long time to recover from, the collision sport that is football. And so our kids going into, let's say we are fortunate enough to play for a national title, if that ends up happening at the FCS level, well, you're giving your kids basically 2 weeks to turn around and get ready to play again. You're going to go into that heavy training cycle in June and July, and then you're going to start contact again in August. And if you have kids that have injuries, whether those are short-term or long-term rehabs, and then you're going to put those guys back in that spot. And that's the thing I don't think people are talking enough about. Okay, they may have, it might even just be a hamstring. Maybe it's a shoulder. Whatever that case may be, they aren't getting the appropriate amount of time for their bodies to heal and go back into that. And they're going to be asked to do it. Make no mistake, we only have so many guys on our roster. And there's a reason why the off season is set up the way it is. And so I think that was an important part of our decision, was looking at the totality of this concept of player safety, health, and well-being. Okay. There's the mental health aspect of the roller coaster. There's the legitimate concern about COVID. There's the, is it right for us to ask our guys to go through the Bataan Death March in the dead of winter out here? We don't need to fight the Battle of the Bulge in Bozeman this summer, or this winter rather. And then there's this idea of this quick turnaround that could negatively impact their health and well-being, not just now, but in the future.
And lastly here, I know your players expressed a lot of excitement that you're not going anywhere for the time being. I'm just curious if you're willing to talk about or acknowledge the, you being tied to the Boise State head coaching vacancy.
Yeah, I don't think there's any secrets, certainly not in Bozeman. The FBO that I was at was well staked out, evidently. Hey, it's always flattering when you get an opportunity to be considered for a job like Boise State. And I appreciated the chance to interview and go through the process with them. And, there's a million reasons why things go the way they do. And I'm really excited and grateful to be here at Montana State University. And there's a lot of reasons why this is still the right place for me. Outside of unfinished business that we have on the football field, I've got a daughter that's going to be a senior at Bozeman High next fall. I've got a son who I enjoy getting to see on a regular basis and see him grow and mature within our program. And I've got 104 other surrogate sons that are pretty important to me and to my wife, Janet. And we've got a great staff here, and they're important to me too. So wasn't my time. And as I stated, unfinished business, and excited to get at that in the near future.
All right. That's all I got. Thanks, Jeff.
Let's go next to Coulter Nuanez. Go ahead, Coulter.
Hey, Coach, does this help you kind of return to a more normal schedule? I know you have a couple games that could be on the docket for the spring, but it seems like now it's more back to the status quo in terms of now just loading up and trying to prepare for that fall season.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some work that we have to do. And that's why it was important for us to get this decision made quickly once we got into January, because this affects, there's a bunch of dominoes that fall, right? How we're going to approach our off-season strength and conditioning program. How we're going to look at our spring ball, and some of that depends on how many opportunities we're going to be able to get some games on the schedule. But I think that is important. And the one thing that was so clear through the fall with our players was how frustrated they were with the constant kind of roller coaster that they were on going all the way back to March. Are they going to, and then that started this fall with, are we in-person classes? Are we not in-person classes? We started training camp in August because we had a schedule. And then we went through 4 or 5 practices, and then the Big Sky canceled. And then we thought there might still be some opportunities for us to compete. And then the presidents voted that, in fairness, if one team wasn't going to play, then nobody was going to play. And so that put another kind of wrench in this. And so it was like, do we play? Do we not play? Are we going to get into the weight room? Are we going to, get into a football mode? And so one of the most important things for us right now is to kind of establish a very consistent schedule for these guys. And this will definitely help with that.
We've already seen now several teams opt out. I know you said, you totally acknowledge all the concerns that exist in the world, but what do you think just broadly of the integrity of a spring season if it does happen? It seems to me that the fall is going to be the real season, the real chase for the next national championship.
I think everybody looks at it differently. I think, if you were to ask me, and maybe some of you have, and I've probably been candid with you, if you ask me flat out, Jeff, do you think we're going to play in the spring, or what do you think of this spring season? I think my standard answer was, I'll believe it when I see it. I still wasn't, we had said that we were going to do X, but with what was going on in the world, I just didn't see the reality of that. And then you look out the window some days and you're like, holy cow. I'm glad we run the ball a bunch, because if we'd had to play 2 days ago in that 75-mile-an-hour wind, I guarantee you we would have won. So nobody else, I don't know who else is going to be able to handle that. So you got to be built for the wind conditions in Bozeman occasionally. But I think that's an important part of this is making sure that we can have our best situation for us down the road and provide that really quality player experience that our kids have come to expect in Montana State.
And last question for me, from a practice time allotment perspective, now I know that there's less time allowed with the players during certain times. Does this, now the fact that you have a couple of games potentially, does that give you more time with the guys moving forward here these next couple of months?
Yeah, I think once we establish kind of what even if we just say, hey, we're intending to play on a certain date, the way it's set up right now, there's a 2-week ramp up period where you can start doing walkthroughs with a ball, not just do weight training and conditioning. And that would be, and then you have your first day of competition is that you state, you get 29 practice opportunities prior to that. So you're going to get, instead of getting your standard 15 practices that you would get in the spring, now you get your 29 practice opportunities, your 2-week ramp up, and then your practice that would be going on while you're getting prepared for competition. And even if hopefully there's more than one opportunity, so that can continue. So yes, I think it's going to allow us to get a little bit more work done than we would in a normal spring. That being said, let me preface this whole thing by saying 2 springs ago, Coulter, we had whopping 8 practices because of weather conditions. Okay.
Right.
So I'm a realist here too. And I stated that early on in this process when they came out with the schedule. I'm like, how are we going to get this done? And if I had 8 practices and UC Davis had those 29 practice opportunities, tell me that's a good situation for me to put our kids in. And I wasn't willing to do that.
All right, Paul Schwedelson's next. Go ahead, Paul.
Hey, Jeff. I guess I'm just wondering, with the possibility, like, talking about, maybe playing a game or two, how does that work just from a safety perspective in terms of like gearing up for 1 or 2 games? I'm just kind of curious, your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think that's where we try to look at when's it going to be realistic for us to get a 3-week block of practice in prior to competing. And I think that's really what it amounts to. I think a month is ideal in terms of that 29 practice opportunities. That's why it's there. It's not there because they picked a number out of the hat. It's there because they've studied this for a long time and they feel like that's what's really ideal in terms of preparing your kids for competition. But I do think that we could probably get ready in 3 weeks. And so you start to kind of look at the calendar. We've given our administration 5 Saturdays not that they have to be Saturdays, but 5 Saturdays that we feel like, hey, this would be the first Saturday that we feel like we could be ready to have a competition. And this would be the last, this would kind of be our drop dead date, that we don't really want to do anything after that because of finals and getting our kids ready to head out for the summer. And so we've already provided a block of time that we feel will work for us. And we're in the process of engaging some other places and seeing if they have an interest in either meeting us in Bozeman or letting us go somewhere else to compete with them.
And then I'm just wondering, how much does this kind of touch on, maybe a desire for an indoor practice facility?
Yeah, I have a great desire for an indoor practice facility. And I think I know that previous staffs here have that as kind of their number one priority for football for obvious reasons. And they were right. Whether it's Coach Kramer, Coach Ash, they were right that we need an indoor practice facility here. But I think one of the cool things about the BAC is we made a decision based on, number one, what was going to benefit everybody the most, and number two, what we feel like was realistic for us. And there's some pie in the sky. I mean, we could put up a pole barn out there and call it an indoor practice facility, but I don't think that the president is going to be satisfied with the aesthetics of the building and how that anchors the south end of our campus. And so there's some other considerations that go into this. And so us getting the Bobcat Athletic Complex, which we have to come up with a better name for, by the way, that's the first tipping point, right? And we did that. And it's going to be a game changer for all of our athletics. Okay. So now we can go put a bullseye on this indoor, and that process is underway. I mean, we are starting yesterday, so to speak, to make sure that we drive that home and that we never put ourselves in this situation again. And it's not just the opportunity to compete this spring that it affects. I laughingly say, why we run the ball so much here? Because we don't have anywhere to practice throwing it. And so the fact that we can go inside and our guys get an opportunity to hone their skills and work on their fundamentals and their techniques, whether it's football student athletes or, I think even more importantly, our community at large is in desperate need of a space like this. You think about youth soccer, softball, Little League baseball. You think of all the entities in our community that would benefit from a practice space like that. And it's just a complete no-brainer. And I think that our community will get behind this. I'm hoping that, we can get creative perhaps and do some partnerships with, Bozeman Park and Rec or some even Little League organizations and different things like that, where we can say, hey, we'll block out the time here. You guys have the time here. I know, again, all of our athletes would benefit from it, but I think the community of Bozeman, it's a no-brainer too.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Sean Rainey. Go ahead, Sean.
Hey, Coach, last one for me. You kind of talked about it from the player perspective of you started practicing in the fall, it got shut down, and this and this and that. And then they're working all winter thinking that a spring is going to happen. Is it kind of unfortunate? Is there a part of you that wishes we would have just made this decision way back then and not kind of – I mean, we obviously drug this out for a reason, but from the player perspective, I would imagine it's pretty unfortunate.
I agree, Sean. And I think I didn't lie to our guys. I never one time stood up in front of our team and said, come hell or high water, we're going to play, the COVID Bowl championship in the spring of 21. I never said that. So this was a pretty easy conversation for me. Guys, we've said this is a maybe. We don't know what's in front of us. We're going to make a decision when we have the information that we feel like we need, and then we'll move forward with what's best for Montana State University and your health and well-being. And so this was I think that's maybe one of the things that has gotten people into a little bit of a corner here is you're pounding the table saying we're going to do X the whole time. I think I was maybe a little bit more pragmatic, and I think Coach Houck was too, where we're looking at it going, I don't know that this is realistic, and I don't even know if it's the right thing to do. And when you have those doubts and those questions, you can stand up in front of your team and be honest and transparent with them, which I know both of us have been. And I think that our players know exactly why we're doing what we're doing. And it's to protect them, not put them in harm's way. And I think they appreciate the fact that we're going to try to get them some level of competition this spring, but we're going to make doggone sure that when we tee it up, in Laramie, Wyoming next September, we got all of our soldiers with us.
Thanks.
Anything else for Coach? All right. Thanks for joining us, Coach, and thanks to everyone else, and we'll see you guys.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Coach.
Thanks, Bill.